together for Natasha Fallahi.
I've been working on my rewrite, that's right. I'm gonna change the ending. Gonna throw away my time and toss it in the train.
You got it.
Every minute after midnight, all the time I'm spending, it's just for working on my rewrite, that's right. And I'm gonna turn it into cash. I've been working at the car wash.
Hi, so I'm actually really excited that David and Andy spoke right before me because I have about a 30-minute talk that I'm trying to fit into 10 minutes, and they covered a lot of the stuff that we all share here in this room. So today I'm going to be talking about shifts happening and how culture impacts our mind, body, and spirit. So we can all agree on this triad here. Traumas, toxins, and thoughts affect our mental, chemical, and structural well-being. And it's easy to see how traumas, such as a car accident, whiplash, or micro-traumas like repetitive motion, aberrant posture, will create structural disintegrity. Or toxins, like Andy so eloquently talked about, those environmental toxins, the foods that we put in, the prescription drugs that people are taking all day, even the recreational drugs, how they'll affect our chemical integrity. And then we talk about thoughts affecting our mental integrity and causing mental subluxations. And that's profound. We all know that. We all know how emotions and thoughts will make our day good or bad, or how they can totally change a situation around. But what is our mental self? Is it the rational thoughts we're having? Is it our emotions? Is it our dreams, our imagination, our conscious, or our subconscious? So it's an impossible question to answer, and we're not focusing on one. So I want to take a step back and look at something that impacts all of those, which is our culture. And what do I mean when I talk about culture? You may be thinking a lot of different things. I think a lot of people automatically go to ethnic culture. But really, I'm talking about a set of values or beliefs that are held. And that can be within an ethnic culture. But really, what it means is that the culture are values or beliefs that are learned and they're shared within a group. That can be explicitly, like a law or a manifesto that a group writes, and they're trying to create a culture around it. Or it can be implicit through behaviors or trends that emerge, and then everyone starts doing that. The point is, we have cultural editors all around us, whether we realize it or not. And what is the cultural editor? It's an authority figure within a specific context. So at home, everybody has a very specific home family culture. And a cultural editor there could be your parents or your grandparents, people who set the tone for these values and beliefs. At school, it could be professors, it could be the clubs, it could be the students themselves. In a church, it could be a priest. What I want to impart with you today is that you all can be cultural editors. Whether or not you're chiropractors or doctors or a priest, you can create a culture and set up values, create environments that allow people to thrive and heal, because that's what we're all really looking for. So how am I doing this? And why am I involved in so many clubs? Because I really like to look at intersections. And I'm looking at all these ologies right now. So I want to present to you some studies that bring together these ologies in a field called, let's see if I can get it, Psychoneuroimmunoen anthropology, also known as biocognition. Now, biocognition, I want to pay homage to Dr. Mario Martinez. A lot of these ideas or the specific coined terms are coming from him. And if you're interested in what I'm talking about today, I highly recommend you look up The Mind-Body Code by Dr. Mario Martinez. He pulls from all these fields to bring together new theories of integrated health. What he's really looking at in biocognition is this universal human experience. What crosses time and space? What has existed in every culture and every place that they've gone that speaks to the human experience? Doesn't matter where or when. These could be things like emotions, basic human needs, feelings we have. A really interesting example is the idea of self and non-self. Now I'm going to jump into some neurology because I am a functional neurology geek. And what we love to do in functional neurology is localize where something's firing in the brain, and then go stimulate that or disafferentate it because we need to balance out the brain. And I think that's a beautiful concept, but we need to integrate that more. Here's a functional MRI study that looks at two groups, Americans and Chinese. And they had them look at concepts in neuropsychology, of self and other. So when they had these groups think about concepts of self, adjectives that related to them, they were looking at what parts of the brain were firing. And they saw that in the Americans, the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, the area that you see up in blue on the screen there, would fire when they thought about themselves. And they go, okay, that's one step in the right direction. Now we know that this area kind of is about self. They did this with a group of Chinese people. Same area was firing. And they go, okay, we're starting to localize where our concepts of self come from. Then they had them think of others. And I'm going to specifically talk about family, particularly close family. They did this with an American group, and they found that that fired in the lateral prefrontal cortex and other parts of the brain that associated with memories. And they said, okay, we're starting to localize now. This is a separation of self and other. They did this with the Chinese group, and the concepts particularly of mother fired in the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex. And if anybody hears Chinese or knows somebody Chinese, they might laugh about that because they think about their mothers and what their mothers think and want of them, and that fires so directly into their experience of self. Now this, we're not localizing anymore, and it's not because we have different brains. It's not because the Chinese brain is different than the American brain. We really have to step back and look at culture here. Shame. Here's another concept that's a universal archetypal wound that they're finding. Shame has a very specific psychoneuroimmunological profile. We've all experienced shame. Everybody in every culture has experienced shame. What happens in shame? Heat, inflammation, increase in tumor necrosis factor, increase in interleukin-2, a sense of shriveling, wanting to be swallowed by the world. That exists everywhere. That even exists in animals. Those of you who have dogs, you know you can shame your dog. 14-year-old boy in Barcelona tries out for the soccer team and doesn't make it. He goes home and experiences a deep sense of shame when telling his father. A young boy of the Maasai tribe of East Africa is unsuccessful at killing his first lion at the age of 14, and he experiences shame. They're both having that same inflammatory process, totally different triggers. Now, the good thing in this mind-body code and this biocognition is that there are antidotes to all these wounds, and for shame specifically, it's honor. Honor is anti-inflammatory. Here's a beautiful example by David McClellan in 1988, I believe. He's a psychologist who did a study by showing groups of people videos that were related to specific emotions. First, he showed them a video of Mother Teresa steeped in honor and compassion, and he took saliva samples every 15 minutes to measure biomarkers to see what was going on with their physiology as they watched this and as they continued to watch it. And what he found over the time that these people were watching a video about honor and compassion was that their immune systems got boosted. Their secretory IgA levels, which is an antibody that your immune system produces to protect you, went up. Their T cell counts went up. Their neutrophil counts went up. This doesn't mean they were attacking anything. This means they were boosting their immune system, getting stronger, and getting ready for any sort of traumas that might hit them. And this happened over this study. Then he showed the group a video of Hitler and Nazi Germany. What did he find? The secretory IgA levels went down. People's immune systems weakened. Their cortisol levels went up. Here's a great example, menopause. This is a biological process that happens to all women. In Peru, menopause and the hot flashes associated with it is called bochorno. In Japan, it's considered the second spring of a woman. She comes into her wisdom. It's something honorable. They measured the inflammatory markers of women in both these countries and found perimenopausal women in Peru were inflamed, had terrible menopause, hot flashes, depression, not so much the experience in general for women in Japan. I really want to focus on this study. Martin Seligman, 1965, ran a bunch of studies that would be considered incredibly unethical today, but we can glean a lot of wisdom from them. So let me explain this study to you because it happened several times. What he did was he had a cage that had electrical wiring on the bottom, a low barrier, and no electrical wiring on the other side. He placed several dogs in these cages, set off a light or a signal, shocked them. The dogs quickly learned that when the signal went off 20 seconds later, they could cross the other side and they wouldn't get shocked. And the dogs quickly did this every time the signal went off, and they avoided the shock. He did this again, and he harnessed the dogs onto the electrical side. They'd see the signal, they'd get shocked, and they couldn't do anything about it, over and over and over again. He removed the harness, same thing, gave them the signal, and they stayed on the electrical side. This is learned helplessness, and it's a psychological concept. And it's when you feel as if you have no control over your environment and you've just resigned to the diagnosis. They did this again with rats, and they gave rats a lever to stop the shock or harness them in. The rats that were able to stop the shock with a lever became empowered, and the other ones remained helpless. He then took these rats that learned helplessness and with empowerment and injected them with cancer cells. The rats that were empowered beat the cancer. They didn't develop it. And this is physiological empowerment. Whereas the rats that had learned helplessness were physiologically disempowered. I'm going to end with this study. And I've studied them all on the bottom because there's several of them. They've done across many years studies of HIV-positive men. Now, if you know anything about HIV, you know that it attacks your immune system. It's not HIV that kills you. It's the fact that it just degrades your immune system to the point where you can't beat other things. It specifically goes for CD4 cells. And so often they'll measure CD4 cells to get a prognosis of where the person is in their state of health. They found that men who were personality assertive were also immune assertive and had higher CD4 counts. Whereas the men who were also HIV positive but not assertive, their immune systems degraded much faster. So there's the concept of health and disease, which is biological, versus the concepts of wellness and illness, where are anthropological, where they're built in by our culture. So what we really need to look at is the causes of health, not the causes of disease. And as many people have talked about tonight already, one of those main things that's cross-cultural is the sense of worthiness, that they are worthy of life, they are worthy of health, they are worthy of joy, they are worthy of success. And if you can shift that in a person, that's where the healing begins to happen. Second is a sense of resilience. He does Mario Martinez, who a lot of this work is based on, he does a lot of work with centenarians, healthy people over the age of 100, and they are resilient. Something bad happens, in the presence of turbulence, they turn it around and they find wisdom in it. And finally, resourcefulness. Whether it's resourcefulness in your physical world or your body's resourcefulness, to use what is there of its physiology and create the best of the situation. So what we need to do as people, as practitioners, as mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters, is recontextualize. When you find turbulence, embody that emotion, feel it, and let go of the story, and find the wisdom in what happened. Learn empowerment in yourself. Co-author empowerment in the people around you. Create a culture, any culture that is, and then find co-authors that help you build that culture, and then the shifts happen. Thank you.
So if you take a picture of